Top of the morning, Dan Proft here, talking about Tony Fauci and his Hello Kitty diary that has been unearthed and distributed, thanks to Senator Rand Paul, ahead of his testimony before congressional committees tomorrow on the Hill. Just recalling some who tried to warn all of us, and some of us who were warned took heed, about Tony Fauci. Even well in advance of COVID. One was Kary Mullis. He is a Nobel Prize winner, was a Nobel Prize winner in biochemistry. He is credited with developing the PCR test.
What is it? What is it about humanity that wants to go to all the details and stuff and listen? You know, these guys like Fauci get up there and start talking. You know, he doesn't know anything really about anything, and I'd say that to his face. Nothing. The man thinks you can take a blood sample and stick it in an electron microscope, and if it's got a virus in there, you'll know it. He doesn't understand electron microscopy, and he doesn't understand medicine, and he should not be in a position like he's in. Most of those guys up there on the top are just total administrative people, and they don't know anything about what's going on at the bottom. You know, those guys have got an agenda, which is not what we would like them to have, being that we pay for them to take care of our health in some way. They've got a personal kind of agenda. They make up their own rules as they go. They change them when they want to, and they smugly, like Tony Fauci, does not mind going on television in front of the people who pay his salary and lie directly into the camera. You can't expect the sheep to really respect the best and the brightest. They don't know the difference, really. I mean, I like humans. Don't get me wrong, but basically, the vast majority of them do not possess the ability to judge who is and who isn't a really good scientist. I mean, that's a problem. That's a main problem actually with science, I'd say, in this century, because science is being judged by people. Funding is being done by people who don't understand it. Okay, who do we trust? Fauci? Fauci doesn't know enough to, you know. If Fauci wants to get on television with somebody who knows a little bit about this stuff and debate him, he could easily do it because he's been asked. I mean, I've had a lot of people, president of the University of South Carolina, ask Fauci if he'd come down there and debate me on the stage in front of the student body, because I wanted somebody who was from the other side to come down there and balance my, because I felt like, well, these guys can listen to me, but I need to have somebody else down here that's going to tell me the other side. But Fauci didn't want to do it.
Yeah, obviously he didn't want to do it. Just like he didn't want to hear or have anybody else hear from the likes of Harvard's Martin Kulldorff or Stanford's Jay Bhattacharya or Oxford's Sunetra Gupta, all the Barrington Declaration signatories who expressed doubts about the mitigations that were being advanced, about the claims that were being made. So many of Fauci's claims, almost all of the significant ones, which we now know were completely wrong. And we know from his Hello Kitty diary entries that he was treacherous in his inaccuracies. He was, in many cases, saying one thing privately to himself in his, notes for his memoir, and something very different publicly. He's a bad guy. And that's what needs to be communicated tomorrow. Going over these illustrations, all these entries that are being circulated and discussed at present. But the bottom line, because something that Kary Mullis said is right, is that, the sheep don't know. And didn't we see that on full display? By the way, Kary Mullis died in 2019. So he didn't, unfortunately, he didn't live through the, better part of 5 years, half a decade of Fauci and Birx's policies. Now factor that in with what he said about Fauci, knowing him as long as he did. David Harsanyi is a senior writer for the Washington Examiner. He's also the co-host of the You're Wrong podcast and author of The Rise of Blue Anon, How the Democrats Became a Party of Conspiracy Theorists. David, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Your sort of top-line takeaways from as many of these entries as you were able to stomach?
Well, I was infuriated reading his entries about having dinner with journalists and hobnobbing with celebrities, because all I could think of were, the people can attend their children's graduations or weddings, or one of my neighbors, their son tragically died, and people can go to the funeral. That's what I think about.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of narcissistic musings about fame made me think about not being able to buy seeds at a garden store, right? And how so many lives are thrown off track, young lives, I think. So, I mean, that's my first thought. And then to get into it more, I think we already knew he lied about most things, but how blatant it was, I think these diaries kind of accentuate, or even more, how long after he knew certain things he was lying about them. You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about, like acknowledging the fatality rate and then lying about it 2 years later, or the marketplace with the bats. He knew about that, and a year and a half later, he was still claiming that that it was very plausible that they had come from that wet market. Anyway, so I mean, that's my top line takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, I just find it jarring how power drunk and celebrity addled he was. I mean, this is like a Lord Acton case study here. March 16th, I mean, at the front end of it, March 16th came out with guidelines that reflected my pushing for more aggressive mitigation, 15-day strategy, stay away from bars, restaurants, theaters, sporting places, blah, blah, blah. Ultimately, talks about convincing de Blasio in New York City to close the schools, even after saying publicly, he never, I didn't close any schools. But here's the thing he said, March 16th, so at the front end of this is such a weird statement to make. Talking about this mitigation strategy that, 2 weeks to slow the spread or bend the curve or whatever the hell it was. Press conference after was highly attended. Stock market dropped by 3,000 points, the biggest percentage drop in history. It almost reads like he was proud of the impact he had, like he has the power to wield such that he could, dictate the direction and the degree that the stock market moves in one direction or the other. I mean, that's the sort of thing, in addition to all the, people calling me amazing and thanking me and applauding me. The whole thing was, as people were having terrible days, as you're describing, just even within your social circles, he kept saying how the amazing days that he was having. That's the real disconnect.
Yeah. And just you saying that, it makes me think we actually don't, not you personally, but I don't think we talk enough about the people who just folded and did whatever he asked them to do without any kind of skepticism or critical analysis. In the diary entry, or maybe it was an email, he talks about de Blasio. He convinced him to shut down all the schools. You're probably talking, I don't know how many people are in school there, but it's got to be hundreds of thousands of kids changing their lives just because he had a phone call with Fauci. Where's the reckoning there, that when these people just shut down a church, which is unconstitutional and authoritarian, and just because some health official said so? I mean, I think that's something we have to grapple with as well, even though I think Fauci does deserve immense blame. He wasn't alone,
No. I mean, right. I mean, there were people that had access to the same information you had or I had that were making very different conclusions, or certainly applying a very different proportionality to the discussion than these rabid COVIDians who behaved like, well, so many of them like animals, especially to one another, or especially to people with whom they disagreed.
Well, you remember all the columns, maybe it was Krugman and others who was big columnists then, about how the death cult in Florida and how I think DeSantis was on the side of COVID and things of that nature. And we see in these emails and diary entries that he was driving the anti-DeSantis front, in the media and elsewhere. I mean, he did it publicly as well to some extent. So there was no room for dissent. He tried to shut down those scientists you mentioned in the Barrington Declaration. And he there's an entry where he talks about trying to get rid of Scott Atlas, who he disagreed with. So there's no room for dissent in Fauci world.
Well, the beautiful thing about this is ultimately he's hoist by his own petard, because even some who were, flax or considerate of Fauci now are uncomfortable with just how, as I said, how power hungry and celebrity addled he was, are comfortable affiliating themselves with that. And so because he had this, he was, starstruck by his own status and memorialized all this. This is going to be his undoing, it seems to me, in terms of his reputation and how he is remembered historically.
Yeah, but doesn't it bother you? I mean, it's the same thing with the Russia collusion stuff. They did it, and then they were like, oh, we were wrong, and then we moved on, and nothing changed. The COVID stuff, nothing changed. There'll be the genocide hoax or whatever is next. Nothing will change, and people will just keep moving on. The media will never admit that they did anything wrong, and politicians will act like they had nothing to do with it. So I don't know. I guess I'm just frustrated that there's no real responsibility taken by anyone for these kind of, this was a massive moment in American history. I think it really changed things in many ways, including our trust in institutions. And we're going to have to live with that for decades.
Well, I mean, I think maybe if we can get Jake Tapper to write another book like he did about the Biden propagandizing,
exactly,
where he says, we should have done better, but it was really inner circle people that are to blame for covering this up, and we're going to try harder. I mean, that should be good enough for CNN, so it should be good enough for the country.
Yeah, it's just a huge vacuum of trust, right? And I don't know, people don't know where you can't turn to Jake Tapper. He's having dinner with the people he's supposed to cover, and you can't, and so then a lot of weird people move into that space, and now, I don't know. I think it's Fauci's fault in many ways, but I just don't know what if we had a real pandemic tomorrow? Who would we trust? The people who are telling us to do things? I just don't think there'd be any trust there anymore.
Yeah, it certainly. Well, or it would be divided along these partisan lines. I mean, you have people, you get smoke from Canadian wildfires, and you get these COVIDians that are talking about lockdowns in this country again. So I just like, among a certain easily frightened, safetyist-oriented, pro-government paternalism segment of the population, which is not inconsequential, they will continue to behave like sheep, it seems to me.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just overly skeptical now, because when the smoke hit us where I live, someone asked me if I was going to wear a mask, and I'm like, I will never, ever wear a mask again, ever. No matter what's happening. So maybe that's not healthy either. But yeah, I think you're right. And too, just Dana Bash, I mean, a lot of focus on Tapper, but Dana Bash, too, who wants to pretend she's a big journalist asking the tough questions on her little Sunday show or whatever. And she's, first of all, like genuflecting before Fauci when he came on for years, and then guffawing with him about, Jim Jordan didn't treat you well when you testified before his House committee, and sending him, commentary on Jim Jordan that is critical of Jim Jordan, stuff like this. I mean, these are allies and maybe even friends working together. This is not... It sounds redundant and prosaic, but I mean, it's important to paper the record. These are allies and friends working together. This is not a journalist providing information to achieve a better to help the public achieve a better understanding of what's happening. Yeah, it's been that way for a long time, and I take it back to the Russia collusion stuff mostly, but as a kind of breaking point where you just saw them working together. It was no longer bias; it was activism. And then all of the journalists used to compete. You'd have papers and towns competing with each other, and now they seem like they're one part of one crusade together, drilling a message in. Friends with people in power, not skeptical of them, because to them access means everything rather than the truth, and that's why journalism is broken as well in most places, I think. Well, and the other thing, too, it seems to me that comes through here is early on they decided that Fauci and to a lesser extent Birx are the heroes of this story and Trump is the villain. And so we're going to produce content in that direction. Yeah, for sure. That happens with every topic. People decide where they're going to stand because of Trump. And that happens on both sides to some extent, but mostly it happens in left media where no matter what he says, they're going to take the opposite side. They, when Hillary wanted tariffs, they loved them. But if Trump wants it, now it's terrible all of a sudden, or the millions of other topics. That's not healthy either, but they think they're fighting for democracy, apparently, in the way they act. David Harsanyi, senior writer for the Washington Examiner, co-host of the You're Wrong podcast, author of The Rise of Blue Anon, How the Democrats Became a Party of Conspiracy Theorists. The Rise of Blue Anon is the book. David Harsanyi, thanks as always. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And David joined us on the alphawealthgroup.com answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Chicagoland certified financial planning professional Tim Stearns discusses taxes in retirement.
Most people are paying more in taxes and keeping less of their money to live and do what they enjoy. That's why we've put out the